Welcome to the third episode of the video series with our partners BettyBlocks in the headquarters in Alkmaar. I'm your host Hadassah Drukarc. I am joined by Marco Mendola, my co-host.
Hello everyone.
And together with us we have Chris and Odin from BettyBlocks.
Well, hello there.
Hello.
Now, in the first episode of our video series, we have spoken about low-code and no-code, the definitions, and also what it means to legal. In the second episode, we have spoken about the journey from starting with low-code into developing low-code solutions, and we've also spoken about what people should be involved in the process. We've already reached the third episode of our video series. In this episode, we'll be discussing the journey of low-code developers, talking about skills and education and what's really necessary to understand how to build solutions with the BettyBlocks platform. Could you maybe kick off the episode by giving an insight in what skills are relevant, technical skills, but maybe also other skills that are relevant for low-code developers?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, first of all, I think you can start. You don't necessarily have to have a particular skill set. It takes a bit of experience, so get your hands on the tools, start playing with them, start using them. You'll figure them out. I mean, they as we've said in the previous episode, we built BettyBlocks with the vision of empowering anybody to build an application. Mm-hmm. But I do think there are some sort of skill sets that definitely do work in your favor. You touched on it a little bit, understanding design thinking. The also understanding a little bit of what actually goes into the software development lifecycle. Those type of things can really be beneficial. But I would say probably for me, I would think that the biggest skill set to have is to have a curious mind and to be problem solving first.
When we look at the kind of the different roles in this regard that you mentioned in the previous episode, we discussed citizen developers, we discussed business technologists, we discussed low-code developers. Mm-hmm. I think that for the listeners, it would be very, very relevant to understand what skill sets may be necessary for each of these different roles, because mm-hmm. you have different levels of expertise that would be necessary.
Yeah.
Tell us a little more.
Well, it's basically like I like to define them as step-in levels based on your programming knowledge, because as I said, it is low coding, no coding, mm-hmm. but you still need to know programming. That's always the thing that sort of confuses people. Like, oh, well, I don't need to know programming as well. To me, there's a difference between coding and programming. Coding is like the very advanced mathematic puzzles, etc., like throwing lines of codes, brackets, weird words together to get to an end result. Programming is knowing that an application has a front end, a back end, a layer in between that makes everything talk together, and knowing how to program well is also know how these layers, how well these can talk together, the layers, and what you can do to make them work together to solve your problems. And for a citizen developer, I only expect you, or at least I, when I'm trying to look into the citizen development learning paths, for example, that we're setting up, I'm trying to look into people that are mainly new to application development. They have seen applications, because it's almost not possible to not have seen an application nowadays. So the start is configuring and maybe doing some visual designs. You can change the web page that you have in front of you. The moment you drag in a little button, you can see where that button lands, and that's where a button is on your page. Almost citizen developers tend to understand that because it's what's in front of them. Mm-hmm. The moment you are also going to think in that second or even that third layer, that's when we're going to the business technologists. You need to think in data. You need to know how the data is connected to your front end, but in a no-code kind of way. What does the tool offer that you're working with, and how can I connect these things together? And stepping away from that, you're going into more advanced waters, talking about security, about data structure, and then even about expanding your platform options with low code, such as creating your own, in the BettyBlocks terms, action steps, creating your own custom components, all kinds of things to expand your low code tool experience. Okay. And that's done with coding. So the different step-ins is basically based on your amount of programming level. How tech savvy you are also really plays a role. Yeah. But that's just to how fast do you adapt to technology?
Mm-hmm.
I think you raised a really important point, and it is one that I think is often misunderstood or not acknowledged, is that coding is only a component of programming. And I think that's really important for people to remember, because they think, oh, no code, okay, it's replacing all of programming. It's not no programming, it's no code. And that's a very important differentiator to remember.
So that's a really interesting point you just made. I'm so curious, when we look at other roles within this context, and I'm talking about those that do not have the required programming or coding knowledge. For instance, legal professionals, what we spoke about in episode 2, but I could also imagine other professionals that may be involved in this process without necessarily being the ones that are building the applications. What skill sets and knowledge should they acquire to effectively communicate with those that are building the applications, and to also add a relevant contribution to the building thereof?
I would suggest, or I would advise, just the how I call them, is one of the courses we've developed, the Citizen Development Basics. It basically gives you a glimpse of the layers of an application, of that front end, back end, etc. Because that doesn't. It's not like a week-long course or something. It's just a glimpse of what the app developers are dealing with. Because if you, as a legal professional, can think in the layers, or at least are aware of the layers that app developers are talking about, you can already join discussions on what they're building with, and whenever they're talking about their data gibberish or whatever, you might be able to understand them a little more as well. And understanding the programmer, understanding the developer, can help them solve each other's problems. It's a leeway. So if one of the, like, if same for programmers, if a programmer would attend a business class, then they would finally be able to understand what the legal professionals are talking about. Yeah. Sadly, a legal business class takes a little longer, for example, and I haven't seen a 30-minute legal business class. Whereas within 30 minutes, you can understand the general of what an application is built out of. Like regarding the layers, for example. So as long as you say like, hey, I got something in my front end isn't clear, then oh, okay, that's the stuff I'm looking at. Oh, that's with the buttons and such. And if I'm saying like, oh, there's something with the data. Oh, I can't see that, but it's something somewhere safe in the cloud, whatever. You at least know some of the references that are being thrown out there. So I'd say as an important skill set to have, or what to learn to get started, is some of the application basics, especially since more and more things are happening online nowadays. It's so important to just know the world of the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's just getting those basics. There's always, as you mentioned, being tech savvy, and being curious. There's a lot of tools that are out there to use. Just go play around with them, experiment, right? You learn through experimentation. I'm someone that was not a hugely academic person, but I'm someone that learned through experience. And I found that for me, it was a much more effective way of learning. Even for instance, with the platform and stuff, I followed some of the courses and stuff, but then when I actually learned it was when I just got my hands dirty with it. And that's when everything started to make more sense. And as I said, there's a lot of tools and things out there that you can just go play around with, learn, and that skill set alone will take you a lot further than most people are already.
Thanks, Chris, for this point, because I really believe myself personally now in what you're saying about the embracing the culture of, calling it the culture of failure is not what I'm saying. It's embracing the fact that you can fail in order to learn something, to do it better and to get it better next time. So, and I think I'm not very sure about how the, let's say, coders or technical people approach this, because I don't have that background. I have a legal background myself, but I can tell you for sure that the legal background, let's say at least the old school one, doesn't allow you the kind of the failing, iterating approach. You need to make it perfect first time. It doesn't matter if you're in academia, if you're in a firm, if you're in a business. This is something, I think, it's an approach that we really need to challenge to make sure that, let's say, the low-end tech can fill the gap.
But as you say, it's really been sort of programmed into you. to believe that
exactly.
failure means that it's a complete disaster, right? Where it's just like when we were speaking about sort of feedback. Good feedback's great. Bad feedback is even better, right?
Fully
it's
agree.
the same thing as if you build things and you're successful all the time, you don't learn as much as you do when you're failing. The leaps of knowledge are much bigger in failure than they are in success.
This is so important to share, I think. Thanks so much, Chris, for stressing this up.
Legal professional or not, I have yet to see someone that's like, oh, I love digging through these 1998 archives about questions and things that happened around that time. Oh, this is amazing. Hey, by the way, sorry if it is your thing, your passion, keep it up. But if we can have that all in one tool, I mean, it's going to save you a lot of searching.
Okay, and now I'm going to say, why should I trust you with that? Let's say I'm a lawyer, I have no technical knowledge whatsoever, but I'm extremely enthusiastic because you said before, episode 2 probably, you said, we need a tiny bit of enthusiasm from you, otherwise it's going to be very, very hard to communicate. Why should I trust you if I don't have any background? And what I say by trust, I don't mean like, hey, we're Betty Blocks, we are an established business. I'm saying you as expertise that you can offer. How would you respond to me?
Because you find it very difficult to get into the whole innovation, automation, etc.
Correct.
So
in your experience, what's the easiest, best way for you, to educate me / empower me to progressively trust you more?
I can only do 2 things at that point.
Yeah.
I can check with you how much you actually love digging through those 1998 archives.
Okay.
And
that's
you probably love it, don't you?
Yeah, true. I mean,
okay. Well, no, but then that's all right. But I dare to say that probably 80 to 90% will be like, no, it's actually annoying.
True.
And then we get back to that thing that I talked about earlier. You have a problem, a problem together that we could likely solve with some innovation. And we always have some, and that's the second thing I'm coming through. We always have some demos, some use cases ready to show like, hey, these are the things we've already tackled. This is the stuff that we have available in our arsenal to show you like other companies have done it. So what's keeping you waiting?
Fair enough.
Well, your passion for looking through those archives, of course, but exactly. Let's just
good reason, Odin.
it.
Let's keep the conversation going. I like it. I like this guy.
So by showing use cases, we can get people to work, both legal professionals and low-code developers and all the other roles that we mentioned before, to work together. That's a way to convince, you believe, people to work closer together, and for legal professionals also to, build up knowledge on this in this field.
Mm-hmm.
Can you maybe highlight a little bit more about these use cases? I mean, at least explaining maybe some to the listeners out there, trying to convince them why should we use low-code to develop solutions for our problems. Can you maybe come up with a couple of use cases that may be relevant to share?
Yeah, just quickly on the first point,
definitely.
is that there's definitely showing this to legal professionals, but you also got to understand within the legal professionals that there's also a lot of different personas there.
Sure.
So it depends on what type of legal professional that you're talking to. Because if you're talking to someone that's enthusiastic, wanting to get into tech, you can speak to them a lot about the excitement, the innovation, that type of stuff. But if you're speaking to a partner in a law firm, then the question is going to come back to, okay, like I've got this client is asking me for this service, so are you able to help me build a client portal that's going to link to our DMS, our document management system, as well as our billing system, and it's going to create a way for us to effectively communicate with that client, share relevant information, and provide an element of self-service. So it's going to go back to like, okay, if I go low code, often I don't really care as much about the vehicle. Mm-hmm. It's about the destination, right? So if I use this low code, how is that going to affect my bottom line? So it really does depend on which type of legal professional you're speaking to. But to the use cases question, there's a huge variety there. We've seen, for instance, amongst our clients, people building sort of knowledge banks, which then are going to allow them to leave work with paralegals to a later stage before they pass that work over, and that's going to allow them to carry more workload and ultimately help the firm get a better realization rate. Then you've also got what I mentioned in the previous episode, was also like building applications. So, you've got a client and you want to build a personal injury checker, or you want to build a GDPR compliance checker, all these type of tracker type of tools, which again really allow the clients to self-serve themselves. It allows you as an organization to acquire very valuable data. There's the client portals that I mentioned. And I mean, there's a huge variety. One of the other quite common use cases that we see getting being built within Betty Blocks is risk assessments. So how can you've got a new contract that's come in, you need to run some assessments. There's maybe a new organization that your client is acquiring. You need to run through a whole risk assessment. So how can you create that that is a user-friendly, smart assessment that you can quickly go through, fill in the relevant information, and that will then calculate everything and generate your report that's going to give you what you need to meet that certain need. So it's and that's only a few examples of types of use cases. And we go outside of the whole legal sector direct. We had the whole COVID situation. We had clients that were building desk reservation applications because there was an immediate need. There was a problem there. We build a solution, and yes, it only lasts for that short period of time. But if you had gone through the traditional software development route for that, it would have taken too long. It would have been massively expensive, and by the time you got delivery, COVID was over. So it's those are the types of things you can build. But it's all. I would always suggest is start with a problem and start small, build up. You see a lot of stuff that's happened in the CLM space.
CLM, what does it mean?
Contract lifecycle management.
Thank you.
A lot of stuff that's happened in that space, and one of the downfalls that I've seen there is from the legal professional perspective, they've all wanted this end-to-end solution, right? It's got to be end-to-end. It's got to be end-to-end, but there's been a lot of issues with adoption and getting it to work. And I spoke to another firm, and we were talking there about it. You need to identify the whole process, map it out, pick out what are the most painful parts of this process, start developing micro solutions just to solve those. And then if you can find an effective way to introduce that solution at the point of need, it makes an obvious thing. Oh yeah, why wouldn't I just try to use? And as soon as you get that ball rolling, it'll drive your adoption up. And over time, you'll develop out your CLM system that's going to be fully addressing your organization's need. And you're not going to be wasting a whole bunch by going and buying the end-to-end solution that maybe 50% of people actually use.
I think it's very interesting what you mentioned about the micro solutions. We oftentimes tend to think in big solutions. But that's like the goal, right? Yeah. But I guess it's the small things that count in this sense.
Yeah, and by all means, the big solution is the end goal. But you don't just wake up one day and boom, we go straight to the finish line. You've got to take the little steps along the way, and just think of micro solutions as those steps. Yeah. And as you build them, you get faster, you get better, you start understanding the process better, and that ultimately will, I wholeheartedly believe, will drive a lot more adoption and a lot more success with solutions.
We're heading towards the wrap up of the episode. We spoke about skills, we've spoken about case studies or use cases, resources. Odin, you mentioned that Betty Blocks actually also creates courses for local developers, for other roles that are involved in the development of solutions. Can you give us some more resources for our listeners, those who are interested in exploring the field of low code? What should they look into?
What should they look into? Well, of course, the Betty team. I've got a whole bunch of learning paths ready for every development, for every persona level. Stepping in with the citizen development path, a whole introduction in what are apps, What is the development flow like, and how can you fit this within your Betty development life cycle? Then we have a learning path split into just the essentials and the advanced version for business technologists, because that's where you really start to dive into those programming basics and how do the layers talk together. And after that, we got the low-code path, talking about how do I expand the options that my low-code platform offers. And that's all framed within the Betty terms. So that's what we have ready. All in video format. We have a bunch of documentation, and we have some exams ready as well. So
really,
you feel
exams?
Yeah, so you feel like, hey, you know what? I actually kind of want to check how great my low-code, no-code skills are with Betty. You can do some exams.
Yeah, and maybe to add to that, maybe moving a little bit more towards the slightly more seasoned professionals that are going to sort of start using these sort of tools in their firms. One of the things I mentioned earlier as well is that we as an organization have always had this focus on being full service and not just being platform. So we have, for instance, we've got a team called PDS, which is Premium Development Support, and they will work alongside you, train you, and they will get you fully ready to work and use the tools. And then they'll do everything but build for you, for instance. And then you've got other teams that will actually, okay, you're missing a certain developer skill set within your own organization. We can help you plug that hole, because obviously we've got quite seasoned developers ourselves. So when, for instance, I'll use law firms again, often don't have that really top end development expertise internally, we can help fill that gap. And then they always are there to have Q&As and run through things with you and really help you understand how to be successful with the solutions.
Great thing is, we're not done yet. Almost of the episode, but not with the entire series, because we are actually going to roll our sleeves up and really get into practice. Odin, I'll leave the floor to you. You know what we're going to do.
It's going to be demo. We're going to look into a problem. Well, as I said, it's important to have a mutual problem, so we're going to discuss a problem. Then we're going to talk about, what kind of setup would we want to fix that? And from there, we're going to dive into creating an MVP, a minimum viable product in Betty Blocks, to tackle the problem with a low-code solution.
Sounds fantastic.
Sounds extremely exciting. If the listeners, if you weren't convinced yet, watch this. If you weren't convinced after this episode, definitely take a look at that video. I think it's a nice addition to your educational content. Within the back of our mind in creating that video, the idea that we want to bring law and tech closer together, it might be a nice starting point to dig deeper into low code and start developing your own solutions.